When I was taking statistics at Skagit Valley College, my professor asked the class a question. Does anyone know what the term gerrymandering is? Both of us shared an interest in politics, and I wanted to know how many of my classmates knew what the term meant. I went into class thinking that maybe just under half the students knew what gerrymandering was. When he asked the question, less than 10% of the class raised their hands. It's unfortunate that so many young people are unfamiliar with a process that's so critical to our democracy. Gerrymandering is a process of political redistricting where a jurisdiction's election boundaries are redrawn to give one side an unfair advantage over the other. Let's use a hypothetical to explain what that is. Say that Washington State, a jurisdiction that currently has 10 federal congressional districts, was redrawn after the latest census as demanded by statute. In the latest presidential election, Democrat Joe Biden won about 58% of the state's popular vote to Republican President Donald Trump's 39%. This is about a 3-2 advantage for Biden over Trump. Given that proportion, you might correctly assume that if this ratio were to translate over, that Biden would win about 60% of the seats, or 6 seats, and that Trump would carry about 40% of the seats, or 4 seats. Seems fair, right? However, no state in the U.S. assigns congressional districts based on proportion. We draw districts in certain ways which often distorts ratios, sometimes to the extreme. Gerrymandering is the very definition of extreme inequality in partisan representation. But how could Washington's districts be biased to one side? Let's say that someone wanted to redraw the state's districts to give all 10 seats to the Democrats. They would probably do this by drawing in the less populated and Republican areas of eastern Washington and with the more liberal, populated, and vote-rich areas of western Washington, so that 60% of the voters in each district voted Democratic and only 40% voted Republican. Even though the percentages in each district are representational of the state, it would give Democrats a substantial majority in every district, ensuring that every seat would vote reliably Democratic in every subsequent election cycle. Overall, this would give the Democrats a 10-0 advantage over the GOP in a state where Trump got a smaller but still substantial 40% of the vote. Fortunately for us, Washington's redistricting process isn't that unfair to the smaller of the two parties. We have a bipartisan commission to redraw our district lines, meaning that both parties have an equal say in redistricting. However, not every state has a process that's as fair as our own. In many states, redistricting is controlled by the legislatures, where one party has an advantage over the other. As one side has more power, they have a greater ability to affect district lines, which benefits their own party unfairly. This has led to multiple states' boundaries being skewed to give one side an unfair advantage, and the effects are easy to spot. As of today, there are at least 20 states that have at least some partisan tampering to districts, some much more extreme than others. With this knowledge, is there any democracy that has mandated bipartisan redistricting? To answer that question, we'll look to our neighbors to the north. Canada's national legislature has district boundaries which are much fairer than our own. They're compact, show little signs of partisan bias, and are more proportionate to the electorate of each province. But what does Canada do to ensure that their redistricting is more fair? According to Canadian legal writer Charles Paul Hoffman, Canada's redistricting was once like our own. Each province would draw its own boundaries based on partisan wishes, resulting in vastly unfair district lines. They were so unfair that districts in some parts of the country had over 20 times the population of districts in others. This continued until the mid-20th century when the province of Manitoba decided to try something different. They created a nonpartisan commission consisting of the province's Chief Justice, its Chief Electoral Officer, and the President of Manitoba University. The maps created by this commission were so impartial that the federal government passed national redistricting standards, which ensured that all provinces adopted the same commission, an effort that was praised by multiple parties and seriously crippled gerrymandering nationwide. According to political scholar John Courtney, districts in the province couldn't deviate more than 25% from the province's population quota, ensuring that the districts weren't freakishly disproportionate like they were before. Unfortunately, enforcing the same reforms in the United States is not as easy. Some states have adopted bipartisan redistricting commissions to redraw their boundaries, but most haven't. Enforcing fair redistricting through the United States federal government has some serious hurdles. First, there's no bipartisan effort to outlaw gerrymandering within Congress. Since the United States leaves redistricting to the states through the 10th Amendment, creating federal redistricting standards would require a supermajority to amend the Constitution. On top of that, 3/4 of the states would have to rectify this amendment to make it law. We're not even close to reaching any of those requirements. Even the United States Supreme Court has refused to hear cases challenging gerrymandering at the federal level, effectively leaving the process to the states. There's no easy way forward to end gerrymandering in the United States as there was in Canada. However, it's not impossible. The reason gerrymandering isn't such a big issue is that many citizens don't even know what it is. The example from my statistics class proves that. Perhaps if we made efforts to educate people about gerrymandering in schools and other educational facilities, we might be able to form a nationwide consensus against the practice. As such, it may be fair to say that only education can overcome the constitutional and legal hurdles towards impartial